Africans are calling for a stronger commitment to stabilizing public finances with focus areas including education, healthcare, safety and security. Iman Repeti joining us live from the mother city, the second budget for the GNU here, Iman, but also one where they need to find stabilization of South Africa's debt, and international investors will be keenly watching.
There's so much to say about South Africa's finance story, including schizophrenia from last year, Arabile. I think newsrooms around the country overspent their travel budgets, getting us all down to Cape Town for not only the first time, not only the second time, but finally for a third time when that budget finally went through. Of course, it was the teething moments for the government of national unity. Are we going to see a repeat of those types of incidents that we saw last year? The expectations are that no, that hopefully this time things will go through quite smoothly. And I was quite intentional starting with the history of South Africa by looking at these really old buildings that have witnessed South Africa's history through colonialism, apartheid, and then democracy, because it was history making of a special kind last year when we went through not only one but two and then finally landed on a third iteration of South Africa's budget that was then accepted. Remember, the big sticking point was around a proposed VAT increase, and that saw a lot of political pushback. It saw a lot of legal challenges and heated public debate. So what is it going to look like this year? You talked about creating a stabilization budget, and I think that for families who are gathered around possibly the breakfast table, if they're lucky enough to have a breakfast table in the country this morning, given our levels of hunger and poverty countrywide, some of the big questions are going to be, are there going to be new taxes? Will things like food, will things like fuel become more expensive or become a little bit cheaper? I think critically, as we've polled our viewers before, are there going to be jobs, particularly for that massive cohort of South Africa's young people? And will government spending finally start delivering visible improvements? We saw the allocations to Social Security last year. And we saw, again, continued debate. It depends on where you're looking at this budget in South African society. If you're an investor, what does it look like for growing the investment pie? Who gets a piece of that pie in South Africa? If it's for South Africans who are the most vulnerable, the most exposed, what kind of insularity will a budget like this provide to them? And then it is about South Africa's growth story. As you said, in our growth expectations, just you know, when you see 1% or you see 1.2%, and I know as an economist yourself, Arabile, it's just so frustrating to see that we're stuck, almost anesthetized by problems that we have, whether they're structural or historical or even contemporary, that we can't raise our levels of growth in the country. So we'll see whether this is the magic formula. Has Enoch Godongwana learned important lessons from last year? Well, all will be laid out at 2 p.m. this afternoon in the dome behind me. I think that my guest has arrived. I'm not sure, just waiting for a signal from the office from whether I can bring him in. Otherwise, we're going to speak to Matthew Sparks, who is the parliamentary spokesperson for COSATU. But if you look behind me as well, you can see there's a lot of activity. There's a boom gate just over there. Cars are coming in and out. Matthew's getting his COSATU jacket on, and I'm going to pull him straight in. Did you manage to at least have a bowl of oats or something this morning, Matthew?
A bit of a coffee.
Well, where's ours? You know, we've been standing here since 5:30. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. All right. Jokes aside, it was no laughing matter last year when we had to go through this till we, you know, twice before we actually landed on a number and on a formulation that the country could agree upon. I mean, what are your thoughts out of that moment into this?
Look, I think those were teething pains for a Treasury which had been used to deciding the budget completely by itself, and even just presenting to Cabinet an hour before the budget speech. I think governors learned from that experience. We don't expect the same circus we saw last year of 3 budgets. I think for us the more critical thing is that does the budget respond to the fundamental economic crisis we face of 1% growth when we need 3% to create jobs? I mean, 41%.
Let's stay on it, because I feel like we go through the numbers so quickly. Because just on that 1% story, we've been stuck here for a good long while. Is this government, or indeed the government of national unity, out of ideas in how to actually get growth that isn't reminiscent of, you know, can we call 1% growth?
No, 1% can't be justified as growth. That's barely keeping our head above water. Look, we think, to be fair, there is some progress we've seen in the past few years. We've ended load shedding. Now we need to make electricity affordable. Transit was on the verge of collapse. It's now returning to capacity, not far enough yet. Metro Rail had literally died. It's now reopening lines, including this week in Khayelitsha. The South African Revenue Service have been decapacitated. South African Airways have been buried. So we are seeing green shoots, but we can't be celebrating that when we have 1% growth, when we need 3%, and when we have 41% unemployment, we can't be complacent. So we think for us, it's not complicated. It's about fixing the basics, having an aggressive budget, stimulating the economy, fixing public services, fixing local government, and dealing with crime and corruption. Well, if you look at where the state has turned around, be it an Eskom or Transit or Metro Rail or SCA, they found the formula of appointing competent management, removing corrupt elements, hiring staff, filling critical vacancies.
But these, again, Matthew, these are the basics.
Yep.
Making sure you've got people who can do the job, tick, basic. Making sure that they've got the requisite skills, tick, basic. Making sure that they don't stick their fingers into the cookie jar, basic. Why are we such a basic country when it comes to doing the basics?
Well, I think we want to find a date. We can look at Polokwane in 2007. That's when we went the wrong path. And
I was there. You're talking about the leadership changes within the ANC. You talked about the transition from an Mbeki government into a Zuma government.
well, basically, we unleashed collectively as a society, not just the ANC, but all of us across society. We unleashed the demons of state capture, of corruption. We lost the moral fabric of society. That's what we're having now to go back to fix what we shouldn't even have to be discussing. We shouldn't have to discuss should your point management, which is competent or not competent, yet we're having to do that. And again, government should appreciate the patience of society is not limitless. When 4 out of 10 South Africans can't find work, when crime is a national pastime, when poverty and inequality are ingrained in society, we are going to witness one day an uprising society, and that's something government has got to show a sense of urgency to respond to.
I want to end on that point because I think it's so important. You know, you're dealing with workers across the country, workers who live in our communities, workers that we know. We have family members who are workers and potentially in some ways members of trade unions. When you say their patience is running thin, I mean, how serious are you? I know you've run through the fact that people are generally impatient, but how serious is what you're seeing?
No, people are angry, and you can see it. If you look at the elections every year, leave aside which party people vote for, but the lower turnout, it shows the level of despondency. If you look at any opinion poll, when we go to our own members, the anger is deep. You know, it's difficult to belittle that, and I think government should appreciate that people are not impatient. They don't expect miracles. They're not unrealistic, but we expect to see progress. We expect to see unemployment falling by at least 1% each quarter, so that it falls by about 4 or 5% a year. And we need to see politicians who steal not being redeployed but going to prison. We need to see the state being fixed. So society is not expecting miracles, but they're expecting government, as you're saying, Iman, to do the fundamental basics and to do the right thing.
It's not cool being basic, you know. I'm going to let you go. Matthew, thank you very much for talking to us this morning. The parliamentary spokesperson for one of the largest trade unions federations in South Africa,